What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the VidQ podcast. I'm Johnny D. Wynn, and my guest today is the founder and CEO of Wynn's Kitchen. Wynn, thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me.
Hi, Johnny. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, so I got a chance to meet you through a mutual friend,
Mhm.
Christina, and uh, and was very fascinated to share your story to my audience. So why don't we get started by telling or sharing a little bit about your career at Bank of America and your career there.
Sure. I have a pretty eclectic career background. I started out in banking. I started working at Bank of America as a teller since I was in high school and worked there all through college and graduated with a degree in finance because, being Vietnamese, our parents want us to kind of go the corporate route, the safe route. So I decided to go with finance. I ended up being at Bank of America for 10 years.
Wow.
And, during that time, towards the end, I had a very good job. I was a client manager, I was the VP at B of A at 25 years old. And I was kind of bored. And it was one of those moments where I'm like, I knew there had to be something else. So I started exploring and I came upon wedding planning and thought that was such a interesting, creative career that I didn't know anything about. And at that time, we were planning to start a family. So I wanted to think about starting my own business and having my own hours. And so I launched in the middle of a recession in 2008 while I was pregnant. I launched my own wedding planning company and I actually had that for 12 years.
So launching a wedding planning company
Mhm.
with coming from banking, there's so much
Mhm.
to ask there because I actually share that career path as well. But I was in the wedding business for about 3 years, but on the
Mhm.
video and photography studio side.
Right.
And it was how I got into it was because I was in media and videography, and it was at that time the cinematic style was becoming very popular in the wedding
Yeah.
business. So we
Yeah.
as filmmakers are running managing a bunch of filmmakers thought that was
Right.
uh, a great opportunity to get into, but the wedding
Mhm.
business is special, and it's a very
Is
uh, it's a very unique business. So like, how did you even
yeah.
get in, or like well, I guess my first question to that is, how did you, what is it about wanting to start a wedding planning business, and how did you get it started there?
Right. One of my jobs out right after college was I was promoted to be a branch manager.
Okay.
I managed a whole branch of me up to about 30 employees at one time and managing customers, goals, all that stuff. And it was fine, but you know, I hated being stuck inside a building under fluorescent lights for 15 hours a day, right? And so then when I got promoted to client manager, I'm like, oh, this is so cool. I can work remotely. But then a part of me kind of missed that hustle and bustle a little bit, like just that on the go. And I was actually in a meeting and I met with this one woman and she said, "Oh my gosh, you remind me so much of my daughter." And I said, "Really? Why?" She's like, "Well, you're really outgoing." And I said, "Okay, well, what does your daughter do?" And she goes, "Oh, she has her own wedding planning business." And I was like, "What?" I didn't know people did that. So this was back in 2008, right? 2007, 2008. So I started looking into it and then I found out there's like an online course that you can take. So I did the course and I thought, hey, this kind of incorporates all the things I like connecting with people, being able to go to different appointments and meetings and being out and about, socializing. But then there's a lot of skills that I had from running a banking center that I knew would be helpful, like the organization, just, everything. My timelines used to be down to the minute. It'd be like, 4:55, bride comes down, 5 o'clock, music starts. It's extremely detail oriented. And and it was just something that I was used to running a banking center. Except you get the creative side. You get to do the design of the flowers, the wedding, the decor. And it took a while. Of course, with anything, I started off doing weddings with very small budgets, still great clients, but people took a chance on me. And then, you know, all my friends at the time were in banking. So they're like, what is Wynn doing? Like trying to be, going from banking to a wedding planner. So it took about a year for me to like find different networking groups, and I would go and meet people. And I ended up meeting another wedding planner that was Vietnamese. To this day, he's one of my best friends still, Thomas Bowie. And we totally hit it off, and he became my mentor. And
Wow. So
and then
I
from
want to
yeah,
I want to
yeah,
stop you there for just
yeah,
a sec. That
yeah.
name, when it comes to San Diego luxury
Mhm.
wedding, still to this
Yes,
day in 2023, is
Thomas
it's
Boyd.
synonymous.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I I got a chance to meet him at an industry event in Los Angeles and was
Oh, yeah,
just
yeah.
I looked at his portfolio and it was just blown away. And
Yes,
yeah, so
yeah. So
wow, that was
Thomas
your
is one of my
mentor.
best friends. He's my one to this day, he's one of my best friends. And so he became my mentor, and really, he really, I mean, he was in the business at that time for over 10 years already. And so he really connected me with, different vendors. And then I had the really strong business background. So I would really help him with like the business side of things, like, getting the proper insurance, and we just became really close and became like family. And we would help each other out. Like sometimes I would work with him at weddings, and if I had an event, he would come work with me if he's not busy. But yeah, so it's amazing. And I always feel that I'm so lucky that any industry I'm in, I'm somehow able to find a mentor to kind of really show me the ropes. And I'm a pretty quick learner. So yeah, Thomas Boyd lifestyle. I'll have to tell him. I'll tell him about this.
So highlights. What would be in your wedding business? What would be one or two highlights that you could share?
Towards the end, I ended up doing some pretty big, lavish events. I've done destination weddings in the hills of Los Gatos. I had some pretty high net worth public figure clientele. And so one of the highlights was, I did a wedding where the groom was half Mexican, and he loved Mexican bands. And so they had a second home in Rancho Santa Fe, and he was like, "When my dream is to have my this Mexican band from Mexico City be at my wedding."
Hmm.
And so I ended up, covering the entire pool, building a stage. And this band is actually a Grammy award winning band. So it wasn't just like a wedding band, it was a real pop star, And so they send over the rider, it's in Spanish and 100 pages long. But it was tough. It was a full year. The couple was great. The family dynamic was very difficult for me, on top of the logistics, because of the band being a famous Grammy award winning band. There were very specific requests that they had. And, they just want to show up. They don't want to hang out before the wedding. And so with weddings, everything is so detailed. So, and the equipment that's involved alone is very extensive. So I ended up pretty much producing a concert and a very high end wedding with everyone from out of town. So they were all from Texas. So it was, I would say that was probably one of my biggest accomplishments, and probably the toughest event, emotionally and physically. And at that time, I just had my second daughter. She was only 3 months old at the time. And that week, I worked 20-hour days every single day.
I
So that was probably one of the most challenging. But those moments let you prove to yourself that, wow, like I didn't know I was capable of doing that, right?
you just sharing that story. There's a lot for me to kind of comment on. One is, um, I'm I was always envious actually when I was in the wedding business. I wished I was actually on the coordinator or planner side because my prior background
Yeah.
is I'm also running a studio was super cool,
Hmm.
but my love and my passion is I do concert production, and
Oh,
I also do
wow.
I love doing party planning. So I
Hmm.
always, in being working on the video side, you work really
Hmm.
closely with the planner and the couple, right? But
Right, right.
I always I feel like my personality would have gelled more in the
Hmm.
like what you just described seemed extremely
Yeah,
fun for me because
right.
I think one thing I did love about the wedding business, not just being a part of someone's special moment, um,
Hmm.
but no two weddings is the same because no two couples are the
No,
same. And
exactly.
you actually, it's almost you're you got some templates you're kind of following, but like
Hmm.
the music selections are always going to be different, the floral arrangements are going to be different, the
Yes.
storytelling is going to be different. So I think that's what I thoroughly enjoyed about the wedding business.
Also,
Um,
the weather is different.
oh my god,
You know? So it's like there's so many things. I think that I always tell people there's no waste of a career. Like every path you go down, there's never a waste. And the wedding business humbled me, but it also prepared me pretty much for anything in life after that,
it
between banking and event planning. Because and for me, I care so much about my clients. Like I just want the best for them to have the best time and the best day. And there's so many things out of your control. um one time, the florist coming from Orange County to San Diego, there was a huge accident on the 5, and it was a Catholic wedding. So Catholic weddings are very on time, and I mean, we were just all sweating, waiting for the flower truck just to show up at the church. I mean, the groom thought the bride wasn't going to show up, you know? And then, or the weather, whether it rains or it's too hot and the cake melts. So those are just really difficult challenges that you have to really think on your feet and stay calm, because the tensions are so high for things that you can't control. And I think after 12 years, it did take a toll on me, just because I care so much. And when things don't turn out, even though it's out of my control, it's, you get like empathy fatigued, right? It's like, oh, even it's like, gosh, they spent so much time. They're such a great family, and the weather just didn't work out, or something didn't work out. Um, so I think for me, that was probably the toughest part. It's like taking on that burden, of things out of my control. But I've met the most amazing people. I've had the most amazing experiences. um, I mean, the hotels, the private homes I've been to, the people I've met are just, they never leave me. And to this day, I still keep in touch with clients. I've done their weddings from over a decade ago. It's And even vendors that I used in weddings, all these years, have somehow come up to help me with Wynn's Kitchen, where I'm at today. And so it's really an incredible, special career for sure.
now I what advice would you give someone who it's a girl guy that's interested in
Mhm.
entering into this business, the wedding business?
Into the
What are
wedding
one?
plan. Um, I would say, definitely try to see if you can shadow with someone, because sometimes it sounds very glamorous, and it seems like it's very fun and easy. And I used to tell my staff all the time when they're applying, I said it's 10% creativity, 90% business. And when you have and you have to really not take things personally, because when
Yes.
there's parties and events, sometimes there's a lot of alcohol. Things can get a little out of hand, and tensions are high. People might raise their voice, but they may not be upset with you. So just trying to you really have to be disciplined in your emotions. Because things happen, people say things, and you're just trying your best to make everything run smoothly. And so I think controlling and managing emotions is a huge strength that you need to have to be in that business and thinking on your feet. So I would say shadow people as much as you can. Get involved, see what the day looks like,
See what the
because
day looked
you
like.
know because we work, sometimes we work 18, 20 hours like on your feet and in 90 something degree weather. Um, and the adrenaline keeps you going, but you really have to love it. Because it's not as glamorous as it looks in pictures and on Instagram when you're on the other side, you know.
I can't agree more. I I gave that similar advice to a young gal who was
Mhm.
who asked me to mentor her for the industry, and I said,
Mhm.
if you're lucky enough to shadow a planning company, do it,
Mhm.
do it,
Right.
because you don't know.
You
Planning
don't
your
know.
friend's wedding as a bridesmaid, that's a very different experience than doing it as a
Right.
profession.
Exactly. Exactly. And there's so many, you really have to be like a psychologist. There's so many family dynamics involved. Every wedding's different. Every situation's different. So the emotional side is very important. Like really not taking things personal and just keep moving on, trying to stay calm, get everyone kind of just relax and get the show on the road. So
For me, I would say one of the highlights that I enjoyed was,
mhm.
like I said earlier, there's no two weddings the same. So seeing
Right.
multicultural weddings are really fun for me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And just being able to understand, and I had the privilege of doing a lot of South Indian weddings and seeing,
Yes, yes.
and learning their culture. And
Yeah.
so to
It's so
and
fun.
sometimes
Yeah.
it's fun, right? And then seeing like there was like a
Yeah, it's
Vietnamese
so
Mexican
fun.
wedding one time, and how they
Mhm.
and I
Yeah.
really like how the couples will mesh
Yeah.
to create a very harmonious experience for both sides. And so there's this
Right,
like
right.
learning, both sides learning each other's culture, but the one thing that bonds them
Mhm.
together is a love for the bride and groom.
Right, right. No, I loved multicultural weddings, and even then, it's like sometimes when I do destination weddings, like we're the family and I and my team, we all spend so much time together because we're traveling, that in the end you become like family. You know, it's
Yeah.
like you become so close and so connected to them because they trust you in so for everything. So the connection is definitely one of my favorite parts of that industry. Just connecting with the people and being a part of a really special day in their life. Um, but yeah, no, Thomas did a lot of Indian weddings, and before in the past, he always counted on me and hoped I was available to help him manage and corral like all the people to get together for the what do they call it, the barat, when all the horse
The Bharat,
comes,
yeah.
and yeah, so it's fun. We've had a
The
lot of
Bharats
great
are fun,
memories to share.
and
It was so fun. You feel the energy and the dancing. I love it.
but just for the listeners, just
Mhm.
so you guys know, Indian
Mhm.
weddings, if you've never attended one, um, just look it up on YouTube. It is they it is they take, it's a huge investment that they put into,
Mhm.
at all
Yes.
scales. So it's,
Yes.
yeah, it blew me away in terms of how, to great length both families are willing to
Mhm.
go just for one or two. Actually, in certain Indian weddings, you can go up to at least 2 to 3 days because of
Oh,
um
yeah.
they if you're going super traditional, it'll
Right.
go for multiple days.
And the energy is incredible. I mean, grandma will still be dancing at like 3 in the morning on the 3rd day, you
Yeah.
know? It's they're just so that's just their culture, and it's just so fun to see, everyone's up dancing, everyone's awake, everyone's there for all the events. It's a huge bonding moment for them. It's a huge celebration for sure.
So for doing this for a decade more and more, and actually even
Mhm.
reaching such a pinnacle part, like working with the likes, like I have such a great deal of respect for Thomas and his work. Like, then why jump into creating like why jump into entrepreneurship and doing a startup and creating a CPG brand? So now I got to know the start of Wynn's
Right.
Kitchen.
So Wynn's Kitchen was an accident. And
Okay.
before I started the wedding planning business, I've always loved to cook. I taught myself how to cook. And I used to, once I moved to San Diego, there's not a lot of Vietnamese food here like there was in the Bay Area. So I started teaching myself. I love Vietnamese food. I missed the Vietnamese food that I used to eat in San Jose. And I just didn't know how to make a career out of it. I thought about doing cooking classes, but at the time I'm like, gosh, I don't know about having strangers in my home doing cooking classes. And if I was to start a family, that's going to be really hard. And the other thing is, I knew I'm just not into opening a restaurant. That's just not who I am. And I didn't want to be stuck in a building, in a kitchen day after day. But I love to cook and I love to entertain. So that's how I landed on wedding planning. I'm like, well, I get a little bit of everything. I'm always a part of like the food tasting and helping them pick out the menu and cocktails and wine. And in 2016, I started having health issues. And, part of it, probably a part of it's related to some of the anxiety I've had after doing weddings for 12 years. It built up. So it's having some anxiety issues. I had very high blood pressure, and I'm an avid tennis player. I mean, I exercise a lot. So I was really surprised to hear that. And it got to the point where my doctor said, hey, if this doesn't improve, you're going to get on prescription medications. So I must be probably, close to, mid 30, like 36, 37 at that time. And my girlfriend turned me on to a program called Whole 30. And it basically, you have to cut out sugar, soy, gluten, no grains, no rice or anything like that, and no alcohol. And you eat clean for 30 days. And I was just so desperate. I'm like, I'm going to give it a try. And that's when I had to learn how to cook with these different ingredients like coconut aminos. I never bought coconut aminos. I didn't know what it tasted like. I just couldn't find any Asian sauces at the store that I could buy. All the condiments in my house, they all have sugar, soy, gluten, or, MSG and all that stuff. And so I started experimenting in my kitchen. And during this time, I was still doing weddings. And so I was just doing this for me. I created just a tiny little pot of satay sauce, which is my favorite Vietnamese sauce. And I was like, wow, this is really good. So I started putting it on everything, my salmon. I started putting it on cauliflower rice. And I would post about it on Facebook and share my journey, like, oh, I'm cutting out sugar, I'm doing Whole 30. And there was a lot of people that reached out to me and said, hey, I'm actually cutting out sugar, or I'm trying Whole 30 too. So next time you make, a pot, can you save me a little jar? And so I was like, okay, this is kind of fun. I love it. So I started making a little bit of a bigger pot and then, jarring in a little mason jar and start passing it out. And then people started posting about it and said, wow, I love the Wynn sauce. It's so good. And then they started sharing, and it just kind of took on a life of its own. So during this time, I was just making satay sauce out of my kitchen, just for whoever wanted it. But I would be like, oh, I'm making a batch if anyone wants some. So then I'll get all these messages. And then next thing you know, I was making 100 jars a month out of my own kitchen for fun. I mean, I was driving up to like 5-star hotels like Grand Del Mar, handing out a jar of satay sauce at ballet because the catering managers wanted a jar. And it just kind of became a part of, people wanted the sauce wherever I was. Like, oh, I'll see you at that wedding. Can you bring me a jar of satay sauce? And I had no professional background in food. I didn't even know what CPG was till like 2020. Someone said it to me and I was like, okay, let me Google that. I had
What does
no
that stand
idea.
for those who don't know?
Yeah.
What does
Consumer
CPG
product
stand for?
goods. Oh,
Okay.
consumer product goods. I know it now, Johnny. But yeah, so I didn't know how to get a food to market, and same thing. I think the most important thing is as you develop and grow in your life and the different stages, you have to learn what you don't want, and it helps lead you to what you do want. Because I know I did not want to be working at a farmer's market every weekend. I have young children, who need me. Um, and they're that time they're in activities and sports, and so I'm like, hey, I don't want to do the farmers market, I don't want to be in a commercial kitchen making thousands of jars. And so I learned about co-packing, and even then, it took years. Ultimately, it took me 3 years of just asking and learning from different people, researching online, making phone calls, calling whoever I can, to find a small co-packer that helped me get the sauce to market. So that's
Got it.
that's how Wynn's Kitchen got started.
And just the name, what made you land on Wynn's Kitchen?
Well, Wynn's my name, and I just loved it because it really started out of my kitchen. My kitchen is like my favorite place in the world. It's where, I love to cook. It's like anytime I'm stressed out, I drop everything. I just go in the kitchen and start food prepping and cooking. That's my form of meditation. So, and actually, I had started Wynn's Kitchen as a blog, back when, like, a long time ago, people were starting to like create blogs, and it was just my little creative outlet. So I had the URL saved, winskitchen.com. And when the satay sauce stuff just came out of nowhere, I said, well, I already have the website, winskitchen.com. I might as well just use the name. And I really didn't know where it was going to go, or how it's going to develop. So I just kind of kept taking one step at a time, one day at a time, to learn the business.
So how's this journey? So the journey for Wynn's Kitchen right now, like what are what are some notable uh, lessons that you can share? Um, and I know you said you started this in 2016, but from
Mhm.
2016 to current day, um, yeah, what are some lessons that you can share with the audience that you've learned?
I would say my biggest lesson is, really just research. Don't get too excited and look and just say yes to everything. Even people who come from referrals or friends, not everyone has your best interest in mind. And I would say one of my biggest, looking back, one of my biggest uh, mistakes is, just trying to hire a broker too soon. And I'm very conservative, coming from banking and managing weddings and finances. I've always been very conservative. And so I didn't sign up with a retainer, thank goodness, with a full-time broker or anything like that. But I did hire, for a small company like me, I did try out different types of brokers. And there are a lot of questions you need to ask before you hire one on. And I'm not saying it's not for anyone, and I'm not dissing their occupation by any means. But a lot of times they don't really ask about the stage that the founder or the brand is in. So it's like they just want to, like, oh, like, even for example, if someone said, okay, I can get you into Whole Foods nationally tomorrow or in a couple months, they don't understand operationally, I can't support that. It's costs so much money to launch into these retail chains, and you have to give free product. I didn't know what free fills was, slotting fees, distribution cost. There's so much cost, and on top of that, going with, especially with a product like mine, it's a natural product. There's a lot of real ingredients, fresh ingredients. It's not just a bunch of vinegar, pureed chili peppers in a bottle with cornstarch, right? And sugar. There's a lot of natural ingredients, and it's a complicated process that can't be rushed. So you have to balance of scaling operationally, financially, and then also, like learning to grow, and learning from your mistakes as you grow. So don't try to grow so fast, too big, and spend your time thinking about, oh, national, Whole Foods, Target. Start in your neck of the woods and build that velocity, do the demos, get the customer feedback, keep learning. You're going to learn every single day when you're out there talking to people and networking. Just, even like a local retailer channel that I really liked. And I was going after them, going after them. And finally they're like, yeah, we love the sauce, but you're not non-GMO verified. And that's a requirement. I'm like, well, no one told me that, right? And luckily, I didn't sign up with a broker that charged me $4,000 a month only to say, oh, they loved your product, but you need to be non GMO verified. Because that took me 8 months to get, and also thousands of dollars to get that, right? So there's all these things that you don't know about for each retailer, and the process and the funds, the money that's required to get in. It
Yeah,
doesn't mean you're going to make money. Mm-hmm.
yeah, absolutely. I definitely want to break that down because I know when you hear, it seems like the holy grail for a brand is like when you get into these big box retailers, or at least that's the
Mm-hmm.
most talked about, and
Right.
people are very proud of that. But me as an entrepreneur myself, it, there's like two parts to getting into a retailer. You got to have the
Mm-hmm.
consumer base and marketing to support that, and then obviously in the
Right.
physical goods, you got to have the money to produce that, right?
Right.
And if and you're
Right.
dealing with when you're dealing with physical goods, there's expiration dates, and there's like
Mm-hmm.
if the products don't move, I don't know if you get charged
Yeah.
for that. I'm pretty sure there is a charge
Right.
for take backs, or I don't know what the exact phrase is, but yeah, so
Chargebacks.
like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
chargebacks, right? So that's,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, to kind of reassess expectations as a somebody who wants to um,
Right.
introduce a brand
Get
and
into.
get it into
Mhm.
retail, right? Uh, what at what stage are yeah, at what stage would you say it's right to bring on a broker or bring on um, a big box retailer, and what are some of those key like tips that you can provide there?
Yeah, and to be honest, Johnny, I'm not there yet. The
Hmm.
more I learn, the more I've grown, and I've done this, predominantly by myself. The more I've kind of learned and understood, like, okay, I know my mistakes. I know I need to stay on track and just put blinders on and not think about what everyone else is doing, because it's hard. You go on LinkedIn, everyone's like, oh, I'm here, I'm there, I just gone to Whole Foods and Gelson's, and you're just like, gosh, like, how come I can't get into there? Or you kind of start feeling like a loser a little bit. But my biggest advice is put your blinders on, look at your own business,
Yeah,
look at the profits. Like, you need to be making money. Like, don't like $4,000 a month for a broker. How much is that gonna? How much do you have to sell? Do you even have enough product to sell to break even? Let alone, because that 4,000 just gets you into the door. And I'm just using 4,000 as an example.
as an example. Yeah,
But yeah, but you get in the door, you have to pay for marketing fees, new item promotions, because once you get on the shelf, you got to help move the product off the shelf as well. So I think really just take your time and put your blinders on, because everyone's going to want to sell you something. Everyone's going to say you can get XYZ number of impressions, but it doesn't equate to dollars, to returns. So I think really be out in the field, especially when you're starting out. And I think my situation is a little different because of the pandemic. Right, I launched September 2019, and then we went into the pandemic, and then just coming out of that and learning how everything works from there. But just be in the field, talk to customers, hear the feedback, and that's where those are the people buying your product. That's going to determine, is your product different enough to make money? What makes your product stand out from any other products in that category? And even if you have 5 stores or 6 stores, if you build the velocity in those stores, it's going to be more than having 100 stores right off the bat that you can't go in to see. You don't know what the placement is. You don't have a relationship with the buyers to learn, and you can easily get kicked out. And after you've invested a lot of marketing dollars in it to get on that
Now,
shelf.
I have a two-part question about
Hmm.
getting out there and knowing your customers. So, first question is, how would you, how would you profile your current customer base? And second question is, because it is a Vietnamese satay product. Um,
Hmm.
have you gotten consumer feedback from the Vietnamese community about your product?
Yeah, so I would say my customers are more health conscious, or
Hmm.
and they're foodies. They like higher quality ingredients. They appreciate that over cost. Um, I do I'm not in the Asian markets at the time, right? Because you go in the Asian market and it's a lot more price sensitive. I'll just be honest. It's very price
It
sensitive. Um, you don't see a lot of like gourmet sauces selling above $10 a jar, right? Or a bottle. But I think that it will get there because the Asian community is understanding that they need to change the way they eat. I mean, we have diabetes, we have, high cholesterol. It's prevalent in my family and even in myself as a 30 something year old playing tennis 5 days a week. So we have to change the way we eat. But right now, it's really the people that already shop in the natural food, shop in the high end butchery shops that love quality meats, that love good sauces, that love healthy ingredients. When I'm out doing demos, a lot of people that are interested in my sauce or interested in trying, they're picking up the jar and they're looking
got it.
at the ingredients. It's not just like, oh, how much, it's really,
Right. It's
oh,
not just
what
like
is
scrolling through
in?
it's
Yes.
ingredients. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What is in here? How much sodium? Is there sugar? What are you using to sweeten it? Right? They are looking and asking questions, and I think that's where I really stand out because it's still not happening a lot in the Asian community, like talking about like healthy, better for you, better ingredients. Of course, I love a big giant bowl of noodles. If I could eat that every day with some, you know, Nook Mum and rice. That's how we grew up eating rice every day, meat with a lot of fat on it. It's just, when we know better, we try to do better, right? And I can tell, like even just from online, I have a lot of Vietnamese clients, probably in our generation that are
Hmm.
health conscious, that want better ingredients, that want to cook at home and but love the flavor, love the lemongrass, love the fish sauce, but they don't want to eat corn syrup anymore. So
Um,
now I don't even advertise on Amazon, and just the keto keywords, no sugar. I mean, all the like majority of the sales on there are all organic.
I would say in terms of to speak
Hmm.
on higher priced or higher grade products
Hmm.
entering the Asian market, I think there are some Asian chains that
Hmm.
are starting to include that. I think I
Right,
believe
right,
Insmart.
right,
I'm starting to see
right,
different ranges in, let's
right,
say,
right,
even in soy sauce and
right,
within our community, the Vietnamese
right.
American community, fish sauce has really
Hmm.
has has evolved. There is
Right.
now a mid to premium grade fish sauce category,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it is a fascinating thing to see how people view it because
Right.
there's two predominantly that I would say stands out. There's the red boat and also the sunfish sauce,
Hmm.
and
Yep. Yep.
big difference in price compared to the squid, like the mass produced ones, right? Like
Right. Yeah, the three crab. That was
three
the
crab is
one.
one of them.
Correct. Yeah, the three
Um,
crab. Yeah.
but I do
Yeah.
see that there's a market for the higher quality, and I know there are chefs that seek out, especially at high end restaurants. I'm seeing the um the uh, the higher end restaurants are using the sunfish sauces and the
Right.
red boat. So
Hmm.
I, I definitely can see your product being used at
Right.
at these institutions or at these restaurants.
Right. And I love that that Vietnamese food and Asian food in general is starting to get elevated, right? It's not just the takeout, it's not just the cheap food that, it's like, oh, the meat, like, oh, this is, it's good, it tastes good, but the quality of meat's not great. We're really starting to see a huge shift from that. And I love that because, I love catfish. I have no problem with eating catfish. Most Vietnamese recipes are with catfish, but now I'm like, hey, there's if I have access to a good halibut or really good salmon, why not use that instead of catfish, right? So just swapping out those ingredients, but keeping the flavors that we love. That's really my passion. Is just making changes for us to eat healthier and for our community to eat healthier and be more health conscious, but keeping all of the flavors from our culture that we love.
I would say Vietnamese food also has quite diversified and evolved into popular
Hmm.
cuisine.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
in the back in the days in high school, like it was just I would mention spring rolls or banh mi's, and that would be
Hmm.
people. Some people know, some people won't. But then
Right.
nowadays, I feel like almost everyone,
Hmm.
at least in, here in Orange County, you say banh mi's or spring rolls or
Oh
pho.
yeah.
It is
Yeah.
it's like as common as tacos and burritos and so forth. But
Right.
beyond that, I think the various different noodle dishes, the vermicelli dishes, are definitely
Hmm.
gaining more popularity. And so
Right.
Vietnamese cuisine has both on the cuisine side has definitely
Right.
has become a lot more popular. And I think with consumer products that we're going to continue to keep seeing that
Hmm.
new products e- enter the market.
Right. And that's my dream and that's my goal and that's something I want to contribute to with Wynn's Kitchen, right? To bring healthy Vietnamese food to the masses. Where and I came up with my pho spice pack. I mean, I have friends from all different cultures who probably just started eating pho last year. Now they're making their own pho at home, and they're loving it. And they're just, they feel like such a sense of accomplishment. They're like, wow, like my family's so impressed and it's so easy. So yeah, I mean, that just makes me so happy to be able to share our culture with other people. And not, have it not be so intimidating. Like instead of just going out to eat a bowl of pho, where there could be, MSG or just it might not be as healthy. Like I have to admit, today was my daughter's birthday. She wanted Din Tai Fung. Um, I love it, but but now I'm like, okay, I'm so thirsty. Like, it's but so you can't eat out that type of food every day. But just having the knowledge and being able to eat Vietnamese food at home without even being Vietnamese and having it better one of the rotations in their family. I think that makes me happy. Just knowing that they can do it at home. It's really healthy and it's not so intimidating. Like people always tell me like, "Oh, Vietnamese food, I love it, but it's so intimidating."
So
Right?
I know you also, since you are a cook, you must have some recipes that
Hmm.
that that you do well, and do you share that through your brand or through your company?
I do. So on my website, winskitchen.com, I try to post a recipe a week. So I share tons of recipes and I try to simplify things or I tell them like, hey, if you can't find this, you can substitute with this. And it's things that they can find anywhere. They can find at any grocery store. They don't have to go to an Asian market. And then I'm very active on Instagram. I post like quick, short recipes on there. And I try to do quick little videos, and it's all live because I want people to know like, hey, I'm the same as you. I'm a busy mom. I'm an entrepreneur mom. And when I'm cooking, it's because I'm cooking for my family. So it's usually like one hand stirring, one hand's holding the phone. It's not perfect, but life's not perfect. And if I can do it, and inspire other people to say, oh my gosh, I have all those ingredients and I have a jar of Wynn sauce, I can just throw that in together and make a quick 5-minute healthy dinner. So I'm very active with Instagram and on my website. And one of the things I'm working on is a cookbook, and it's a healthy twist on traditional Vietnamese cuisines. So I'm probably halfway through writing the recipes, and then yeah, so hopefully next year that will launch. But just really cutting out the sugar. I mean, if we cut out the sugar out of Vietnamese food, it really makes a huge impact. Like, and it's a matter of just substitution. And for me, taste is also very important. So I'm not going to substitute with things that makes it taste bad. So that's one thing I'm really excited about.
I want to talk about your podcast as well. Um,
Okay.
I love the podcast medium. Obviously, I feel it's in a generation right now where everything
Hmm.
is so quick and short, and they have. I feel like you're not able to dive deep into topics or conversations,
Hmm.
and that's why I feel. And people don't read anymore, so I don't feel like blogs are as
Right.
effective as they used to be. So podcasts
Right.
have exploded over the past couple of
Mhm.
years. So,
Right.
what are in your show? What types
Mhm.
of topics do you discuss, and what type of guests do you bring on for your podcast?
So, the reason why I even started the podcast was because I love connecting with people. I love people. I've always been that way. Like I mentioned, I still have connections and relationships with people that were my clients from Bank of America over 20 years ago, down to all the clients I've done a lot of the clients I've done weddings for to this day. So I love relationships and connecting with people. And in trying to learn the CPG world, I love to talk to other people, and vice versa, to help each other out. So I've had other founders reach out to me. We'll do Zoom and chat through some of the things we're going through together. I'll reach out to other founders and say, "Hey, I'm struggling with this. Have you experienced this before?" And in doing that, I'm like, "Hey, I bet you there's a lot of other people that could benefit from this conversation." So I figured, why don't we record it so that, and have it really candid so that, like, through our conversation, they could probably learn something that can help them. And because I'm not a consultant. I'm not going to, I don't charge people for advice or anything like that. Um, so it's just a way for me to put it out there. And I feel like if it helps one person take a step towards their goal, or take a step towards something they want to do, or if they're having a bad day, I've had many moments where I felt like I've hit rock bottom, and I've listened to a podcast and found something I could relate to that helped me kind of like get back on my feet, and delete all those negative thoughts, and continue to move forward, because this is my passion. So that's why I started it. And the guests I have that on there are predominantly other CPG founders, most food related. And like I had a business strategist on here talking about storytelling, especially, a lot of founders are working on their pitch decks to fundraise and for pitch competitions. So she gives advice on how to do that, and the importance of storytelling in your pitch deck, and how to develop that. So just anything that can help other founders, other business owners, and then just sharing. I haven't done any solo podcasts yet, but that's something that I plan on recording, because I've been through a lot. I did launch my
You have.
Wynn's Kitchen, you know, through a divorce. At the time, I was working 3 jobs, sold my home, moved out, and less than a month later, had my first official batch of satay sauce. That's legit. So I feel, and it wasn't always easy, but I think sharing some of those real life experiences, people can really relate to, and either inspire them or help them get back on their feet. And so that makes me happy.
With your company being having an identity with the Vietnamese food culture,
Hmm.
because of the satay sauce and so forth, I'm
Hmm.
curious. Have you ever made the trip back to Vietnam and if you have, what was that experience for you?
So when I went back to Vietnam, it was actually in 2006. So it was a long time ago,
Okay.
and I absolutely loved it. And on that trip was really special because my real dad, when we left Vietnam, he wasn't able to come with us, and he ended up in Melbourne, Australia.
Okay.
So I've seen, I've gone out to Melbourne a few times growing up, and then that time he was getting pretty sick, and so then we all met up in Vietnam, and I just loved it. I mean, the driving was really scary. Like all the cars and people, that was kind of scary, but I just felt so at home. I loved all the food. I love being able to hear like Vietnamese everywhere. And it was just such a different experience for me. And I definitely left there after 2 weeks. My Vietnamese was way better than it was when I first got there. My vocabulary was better, and I love I love all the food, and things just made sense. Like I tell people, I'm like, well, I'm kind of a loud person, and I'm like, no wonder, because I'm like getting my hair washed, and the lady's like, do you want you want some coffee? I'm like, yeah, sure. So she just stands at the door and scream across the street, cafe soda, and the lady
Mhm.
lady comes over. I'm like, this is amazing. Probably some of the mannerisms we have, even though I grew up here, I could relate to, when I went back to Vietnam, and just all the vegetables, everything was so fresh. I absolutely loved it. And
Do you
and
see
I'm
yourself?
excited to go back. So I think Christina and I are planning a trip probably next year.
Yeah, it's and 2006 is quite a long time. The
Mhm.
country itself is going through such a such rapid growth in every sector.
Mhm.
The amount of
Yep.
tourism and development that all the
Mhm.
metropolitan city is already seeing. I think now
Right.
there's several different Michelin star restaurants that are there.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a melting pot, especially in Saigon. So
Yeah. Yeah.
every single time I go back, it's I learn I learn something new.
Yeah. And how often do you go back, Johnny?
I have gone back probably close to a dozen times,
Wow,
and
that's
it's
awesome.
and for various different reasons. My very first time was because the backstory is I am the oldest son in my family, so I'm the Jiaodong. My
Mhm.
grandfather passed away, and he
Mhm.
spent a lot of his time in America too, but he wanted to spend
Mhm.
his last several years in the country. And so as
Mhm.
soon as I heard about his death, immediately it was important uh, for me to be present at his funeral.
Mhm.
And I was
Mhm.
14 years old at the time, and going back i- in without any mental preparation of it,
Mhm.
and then kind of experiencing not city life, but experiencing how a traditional Vietnamese funeral
Mhm.
is, and my role in it, and then being in the
Mhm.
country, it was overwhelming. It was and it was not
Yeah.
only overwhelming, it was short. It was a record I think 4 days, 3 nights. It was super
Wow.
super quick because I
Yeah.
um I had to get back to the States, so getting
Mhm.
over for anybody who's ever traveled to the East, getting over jet lag is already
Yeah.
a lot to get through, right?
It's
So,
a lot.
but then
Mhm.
after that, because I worked as I said, I worked in the concert industry, so I had the privilege of actually
Mhm.
going back several times because of that. Um,
Wow.
I and so every reason, every time I find a deeper uh, connection with the country, and I still strongly identify, and my mannerisms are very American. But I think as every trip, I gain a little bit more clarity in my
Mhm.
Vietnamese identity. So
Right.
I always encourage American-born Vietnamese or anybody who's born outside of
Mhm.
Vietnam to make that trip
Yeah.
back at least once. Not and
Mhm.
For the simple fact of just I feel it's important to be in a country where everyone um, there is of the same
Mhm.
ethnicity, and then uh,
Right.
you'll go through the emotions, and then of how that makes you feel. So
Right. Right.
so kind of follow up my question to that is being in San Diego, how do you keep how's your Vietnamese? How do you keep up with uh the language? Do you have the ability to practice it, or you consume any content to keep up with it?
Yeah. So, I was really lucky that because I came to the United States when I was only 3 years old. But I was very lucky that my grandparents, my why, were the ones that really took care of me, probably up till about 10, 11 years old. And so they didn't speak any English. So I only spoke Vietnamese to them, and I spoke Vietnamese, at home with my mom. Uh, but through all those young years, I was able to retain the language. I can't read aside from food items, and I can't write, but I can speak um, pretty well. And right after I graduated from college, it was funny because in San Diego there's an area called Linda Vista
Mhm.
that was where it was a huge Vietnamese community for San Diego at the time. And the district manager was looking for a Vietnamese manager. So he found out about me, hired me on, and I had to speak Vietnamese every single day, all day. And not only that, but in business, like doing loans, opening accounts, um, legal stuff. That stuff I didn't speak with my
No.
grandparents, but
Mhm.
just I'm so good at like just like hearing the words they say, and then I'm like picking it up, like okay, so I know how to say that now. And that really helped my Vietnamese in the business world. And after that, just the different businesses that I've had, I've been able to find people. Vietnamese people are drawn to me, even in the wedding business. The couple may speak English, but they wanted someone that understood the culture, that
The
can
culture.
communicate
Mhm.
with the parents. And so I was able to speak Vietnamese in that business. And I do have Vietnamese friends. And even recently, because we all speak English, I've been thinking that, I need to start practicing speaking Vietnamese with them when we're talking on the phone just for
Yeah.
fun, just to really keep that. Because I can tell if I don't speak Vietnamese for like a week, I can still speak it, of course, but then it's just a little bit more rough, right? But the second that I'm around it, like a few days, it's like right back on. And like and a lot of people will say that they can't tell. I don't have like an accent. Like I don't have like an American accent when I speak Vietnamese, which is great. But it's just more like, when you're out of practice, it's just a little bit more rough. You have to dig for
Mhm.
for your vocabulary, but I've been thinking about watching some Vietnamese movies lately just to kind of brush up, just to kind of keep it on the forefront, and learning different vocabulary too.
I would suggest TV shows actually. There's a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
cool TV shows coming out. There's one coming out on Netflix that is quite exciting. It deals with tourism, and it brings not just overseas Vietnamese back to Vietnam, but there's a lot of
Mhm.
Koreans, Taiwanese, a lot of
Mhm.
it's a show. It's a show with the intention of showing off all the different tourist spots. And
Mhm.
it's going to be on, yeah,
Oh,
it's going to be on Netflix.
oh,
And
and
it
they're
talks about
speaking
the food
Vietnamese?
too, and it's primarily
And
in
they're
Vietnamese. And
Oh,
actually, no,
very
I
cool.
take that back. It's the guests all speak kind of English because it's not everyone is of Vietnamese of identity. So there, like I said, there was Koreans. There's I think there was a half
Yeah.
Vietnamese, half black girl. So like they all kind of transcend into to Saigon. Then they go to Vũng Tàu. They go to
Mhm.
all. It's a really.
Yeah.
It seems like a really it is a pretty well produced show because the host of the program, his name is Jiang Tan. He's essentially the Ryan Seacrest of the country. He's one of the most
Oh.
prolific MC or host in television.
Mhm.
So so he's hosting it. But there's also a slew of a lot of other really fun programs on
Right.
available on YouTube now. There's dramas, there's reality shows. I earlier this year
Right.
got to participate in the reality show Vietnam Idol. on the U.S.
Right.
side.
That's
So
so cool.
yeah, so and the
And
production quality is exceptional.
that's
It's
awesome.
just as pretty much close to our standards over here.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, and actually I was on your Instagram and I
Mhm.
saw there was a gal that was doing Vietnamese lessons for children. It's like
I
Mommy and Me Vietnamese.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that just real quickly because it was
Yeah.
her company, her parents' company, it's called Teheja, and they started that in about 30 years ago. One of the
Oh,
first
okay.
um, production company that focuses on the language for and children's programming. And through
Mhm.
that, back then it was delivered through uh, DVDs and so
DVDs.
forth. Until the TV
Mhm.
stations kind of started coming around, they started airing their content.
Mhm.
But the it was important for Sophie Tran, who is she's a second generation for that company, uh,
Mhm.
to continue to honor her parents' business by
I love
doing,
that.
now that she's a parent herself. She's like, and
Mhm.
her sister, her and her younger sister grew up in that environment. They're like,
Mhm.
how can we bring this children's programming, and also aim it towards our generation so that we can teach
Mhm. Mhm.
applicable, like, parent Vietnamese, right? To this
Right.
generation.
I
So that's
loved it.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I decided to partner with her, because if I do have a good following within my demographic,
Mhm.
in the age range, and a lot of them are new parents,
Yes.
and I think that one of the
Great.
things is is to encourage um, the, the
Yes.
the the newborns and the kids to start getting familiar with the Vietnamese words. So
Right.
the two words that she chose today was om, you know, another
Uh-huh.
one was
Uh-huh.
ma, like open up. So like
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
I love what she's doing. I love what her and her family
I
has done
love
for the
it.
community, and I wanted to support her.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's one programming that I'm happy
I
to keep.
love it. I started following her and I was telling my daughters about her and it makes it less, because I'm not a good teacher aside from cooking, especially when I was trying to homeschool my kids in the pandemic, there were a lot of tears
Mhm.
on both ends, but like her videos was just, it breaks it down like one word a day. And so it's something that it's like part of daily life. And I thought
Well,
that
that
was
that
really
series
fascinating.
that
Yeah.
so that particular series is aimed towards new parents. So there's others
Mhm.
that are there. There's a sing along one that they have.
Uh-huh.
There are more advanced ones, but I
Yeah.
chose to feature
Yeah.
the that particular series because I feel there's a lot of new parents on my that
Yes.
follow me, and I'm like, just learn
Mhm.
one word of the day. If you can do that for a couple
Right.
of months,
Right.
it'll it'll
Well, it's
it'll
good
help
for
you out.
my kids. They're not so tiny, but they're interested and even just being able to practice the sounds later on if they want to get more serious, it's a little
Yes,
easier if they can have those sounds now, like at a younger age.
exactly.
So I was like, wow, that's so cool. So I'm gonna start doing that with my
There's
girls.
several.
Yeah.
There's actually there's several other channels on YouTube and other
Mhm.
creators that are
Yeah.
focusing on this particular topic. So
Mhm.
I'm happy to actually
Mhm.
share that. I'm glad that
Sure.
you followed her, but there are others out there
Okay.
in the space already. Now,
Awesome.
I usually like to kind of close the podcast with
Mhm.
kind of asking you this particular question, which is, what does being Vietnamese mean to you?
Yeah, Johnny, that's a deep question
That's a good
and
question.
no one's ever asked me that before. And I think being Vietnamese to me is really honoring, our heritage, our history, right? It's like the more I learn about my family, it's like the more I'm interested. It's like I hear stories about my Manoi and how she was an entrepreneur boss lady, like back in the day, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
And she was so underestimated, and she was an amazing cook. Like the whole neighborhood would come around for her cooking. And those were just stories that no one told me when I was younger. And it's different when we come over here as immigrants, our parents are just trying to survive, right? They're just trying to make a living and keep everyone fed. And there's not always a lot of time to sit and learn about your history or your stories. So the older I get, the more I become fascinated about my history, the more I want to learn about my family, and the past. I've been reading a lot of Vietnamese novels like where the mountain sings and Dust Child,
Oh yeah,
and it's just, oh, like it's like, it helps me remember, like, okay, like when I think I'm going through tough times, like look what they went through. They just are trying to keep their kids from dying. And what a lot of people don't realize is when I came to the States, I was born 1980, and it was still a difficult time in Vietnam. So the story is that, my Banoi was able to have enough money to buy 7 types of beans, and they grind it up and to make milk, and then they would add sugar to it because otherwise it's bitter, and as an infant I wouldn't drink it. And so I had very bad teeth growing up, and it's just all these things. It's like it reminds you that we're survivors, if and it helps me not put so much pressure on my kids, because I'm like, man, I didn't even speak English in first grade. I was in ESL. I didn't have any nutrition. I was malnourished, and I turned out pretty good. So it really helps me have a different perspective with my children of like, they're going to be fine, and also just teaching them resilience. So
yeah,
I think being
yeah.
Vietnamese is just really going back to our history, learning about our family's past, the things they've gone through, their experiences, their jobs, and just all like the neighborhood stories. It's so community focused, and I love that. So, and hopefully I can leave my mark. Of course, it'll look different, but I can leave my mark in this world before I leave. And for me, I love sharing food. I love cooking for people and teaching people how to cook, and food from our culture. Just more of a modern, healthy twist on it, but just bringing that out to the masses.
Now, for those who want to support your and want to buy your products, let's maybe list a few retailers, maybe some mainstream
Hmm.
retailers they could probably get it from, and all the social profiles that we could find you on.
Hmm. Well, if you're in the LA area, they're at the satay sauce is at all the Erewhons, which is a really popular retailer. In San Diego, I mean, we're at most of the independent retailers like Seaside Market. I have a store locator on the website. We're actually getting ready to launch into Mother's Market throughout Orange County and LA. So that'll be
That's a great
12
brand.
locations.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's landing this week. So I'll be up there quite a bit once it hits the shelf. And, I think just go on the store locator, see what's around. I always suggest supporting the local stores, the local grocery stores. And if there's not one near you, you can always buy online at winskitchen.com. You can always connect with me on Instagram. I always share my entrepreneurial journey in addition to uh, like cooking tips and recipes.
Awesome. Well, uh, you definitely have my support. I'm gonna definitely go out and then especially at Mother's. At Mother's right down the street from me. So I'm looking
Oh,
forward
okay. So
to
I'll let you
yeah.
know.
Let me know
Yeah, I'll
so I could
let
be
you
one
know
of the
when
first
I'm
to do.
there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But no,
Thank you. I
thanks so much for your
appreciate
time,
it.
and I enjoyed having you on the podcast, and we've had a great conversation today.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Johnny. I appreciate it. And yeah, I'm excited to continue to connect with you and learn more about what you do. I think it's amazing, and it's something you should be really proud of too.
Thank you so much.